Baked Bros presents the Know Your Dose podcast. Join hosts Nadeem Al-Hassan and Derek Espinosa as they turn the soil on the cannabis industry. With over 10 years of combined industry experience, these two experts will deliver your dose of cannabis, psychedelics, and personal development. Follow on their journey as they aim to destigmatize cannabis, combat the abuse of pharmaceuticals, and implement their altruistic approach into the budding cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Know Your Dose podcast. It's Friday Q&A sesh time. Let's get right into the questions. But first, as always, how are you, Derek?
Fantastic. I'm always fantastic, man. Life is beautiful.
Yeah, man, it's another great week down. I appreciate you being here and always getting to do these episodes together. So let's dive into the questions. And question number one is, how did inconsistency help generate the stigma around cannabis? Wow, that's a great question. Very cool.
This is one of my favorite questions, and this is something that I built into our onboarding presentation when we're bringing new people on and training them, because I think it highlights, some of the reasons why shameless plug Bake Bros has made such big waves in our industry here in Arizona, as well as what we can learn from the past so we don't repeat it. So in terms of how did inconsistency generate the stigma around cannabis, when cannabis was first discovered as a medical plant by William O'Shaughnessy, this is like 1848. He was in India at the time, and he was studying botanical medicine. Now, in his efforts to bring it back to the West, they started to incorporate this plant, cannabis, into some of their other formulations. And what they did was basically they were making tinctures, okay? But they didn't understand the complexity of the plant in the way that we understand it today. So, there wasn't this rigorous testing of strains. So they didn't know the varying levels of other cannabinoids, other terpenes, THC itself. And so what you got was a lot of different formulations mixed with different things. And it created this inconsistent product. Now, if I'm a physician and I'm trying to treat, let's say it's muscle spasms, I can't have a medication that varies batch to batch. So once some of these other standardized pharmaceuticals like aspirin come onto the market, well, 5 milligrams of aspirin is 5 milligrams of aspirin. It doesn't change. So as a physician, that is more preferable than something that has varying degrees of psychoactivity, varying degrees of relief. And so that was one of the reasons why cannabis fell out of favor with physicians and ultimately helped generate the stigma around cannabis, because as it lost its medical value and its perception as a medicine, at the same time, you had the stigma surrounding marijuana, which was the same thing, but people didn't realize that, becoming more common. And so people were willing to say, yeah, we should make this thing illegal. Because they didn't, this medicine's falling out of favor and they don't realize it's the same thing. So the inconsistency problem in medical cannabis, in the early, 1900s ultimately helped fuel that stigma, because it wasn't something people thought was worth fighting for anymore.
And here we are today, where we are getting more consistent with the products. The different variations of concentrates out there. Going from certain hash oils to distillate. It's allowing the industry to become more precise with the dosing, and there's a lot of damage that's been done, and it's up to us to continue providing information and products and education to try and mitigate that damage and move forward. So question number 2 is, what does full spectrum mean?
Man, I think we addressed this on a previous episode. I'm not sure the number. If you could look it up, that'd be awesome. But essentially, there's these terms within the cannabis industry: whole plant extract, full spectrum extract, broad spectrum extract, isolate, and there's no agreed upon consensus as to what those terms mean, which is a big problem. So oftentimes when people are referring to full spectrum, I will ask them the question, well, what do you mean by full spectrum? And usually the answer I get back is, well, everything in the plant. Okay, fair enough. So what's a whole plant extract? everything in the plant. Okay, so what's the difference between whole plant and full spectrum? I don't know. And that's a problem. So the way that I've kind of conceptualized it, and we have a blog that we'll link here that breaks apart these terms, is whole plant extract is really the extract that contains everything in the plant. So that's cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, but it also includes the esters. It also includes chlorophyll, the lipids, things of that nature. A full spectrum extract, on the other hand, contains a full cannabinoid profile, a full terpene profile, a full flavonoid profile, but does not include the esters, the lipids, the chlorophyll, and things of that nature. And I think the important distinction there is that we know, based on, the scientific research, that cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids are biologically active. They do something inside the body. Now, we can debate, the scientific research and how much evidence there is to those biological effects, but we know they do something. With chlorophyll, the esters, and the lipids within the plant, there hasn't been any research done on those, and we can't confidently say that they have, effects within the body that lead to positive outcomes the way we can with a lot of those other compounds. And so full spectrum is basically the compounds that are the most interesting to bring about, well-being or to cause some kind of change within the body. Broad spectrum is a little bit different, whether we're talking about it in a recreational or medical cannabis market or the CBD market, because in the CBD market, broad spectrum refers to something that has CBD terpenes but does not contain THC. And full spectrum is just something that contains all of those things plus, the 0.3% THC. But in the medical and recreational cannabis market, broad spectrum just refers to an extract that has some variation of cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids, but typically it doesn't have a full profile. So it may have a few cannabinoids, or it may have a few terpenes. Maybe it has flavonoids, maybe it doesn't. It's more of this broad category that encompasses a lot of other things. And then at the furthest end of the spectrum, you have an isolate, which is just THC on its own, just CBD on its own, or any other cannabinoid for that matter. Did that analysis make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And for the person asking this question and anybody else listening that wants to learn more about it, that episode was called The Great Debate, and it was episode 9. We'll make it easy on you. We'll put that in the show notes. So question number 3, botanical versus cannabis versus synthetic. Number 1, what does this person mean? And number 2, what's the answer?
I think they're referring to terpenes. There is, again, this is another one of those what I would call great debates within the industry. And this is something I think you've encountered as well, where someone goes, okay, cool, you're strain specific. You started off with the distillate. You say you added in a full spectrum of terpenes and flavonoids. Well, is that cannabis derived or is that botanical terpenes? Or are they synthetic? Now, there's this perception that cannabis-derived terpenes are the best terpenes. Okay, and I would say that's a false perception. But it really boils down to, like, what's your end goal? Like, if you're a purist and you think that everything should come from the cannabis plant, then maybe cannabis-derived terpenes are the best. But to assume that there's a difference between cannabis-derived terpenes and botanical-derived terpenes is nonsense. Cannabis produces the same terpenes as the plants that are also producing those. So a good example would be limonene. Limonene is produced in cannabis and it's also produced in lemons. If we were to extract limonene out of lemons and out of cannabis, and then I were to give you both of these molecules, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. They're structurally identical. So then it's like, well, why would somebody use one versus the other? Well, I can get a lot more limonene out of lemons than I can out of cannabis. So in terms of sustainability and in terms of scalability, botanical terpenes are the way to go because we can readily produce those on a large scale with the plants that they traditionally come from. If I want pinene, I'm going to use a pine tree, not the small amount that's produced in cannabis. Now, synthetic terpenes are different. These are lab created. Typically, they don't start from natural materials. They're synthesized, and they can actually potentially be somewhat hazardous because the materials that they use sometimes can produce different isomers of the compound, which means that it's the same molecule, but it's orientated differently. And so the way that it interacts with your body is not the same as, traditional limonene. And so I would say that at least right now, you do want cannabis derived or botanical terpenes. You want to stay away from synthetic terpenes because there just hasn't been enough research on their effects on the body. And it seems to be the case that some of these synthetic terpenes that are orientated different could have, not as beneficial effects as the ones that are derived from nature.
So it sounds like, to sum it up, that botanical is going to be the best option, again, because of the sustainability and the ability just to have more of it in abundancy versus, you'd have to grow a lot of cannabis to extract a lot of the terpenes that come from it.
Right. From a business perspective or from a product perspective, botanical definitely is the way to go. And so the caveat is to the consumer, you just have to realize that if we're creating a strain, it really doesn't matter as long as the ratios all map out and are proportional to what you would find in the traditional strain. You're not going to be able to tell a difference.
Fantastic. Thanks for answering the questions, bud. And audience, thank you so much for submitting these questions. Keep them coming. If you want to submit a question, click the link in the show notes. You can email us. You can send them right in. You can hit up bakebros.edibles on Instagram. You can hit KYD podcast on Instagram. Either one will work. They'll all get filtered back to Big D and myself. Everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Please, again, leave a rating and review. We'll send you a free t-shirt. And these aren't some cheap Hanes t-shirts. These are nice, tri-blend, soft, comfy t-shirts. All right. So we don't play games. Everyone, again, have a great weekend. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Quick disclaimer. The Know Your Dose podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. Let's be real. None of us are doctors. Our content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical or public health advice. Please be smart and always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare professional with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Seriously, never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast. That would just be insane.